Well, good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to another of our webinar series, a special edition of a Thursday webinar. And occasionally they're on Thursday, but it's a Wednesday webinar series, and we're looking at resources available to small businesses that are impacted by the pandemic and looking at the most important topic of the day. So good afternoon again. I'm Kelly Bearden. I'm the director of the California State University Bakersfield SBDC, or Small Business Development Center. And I'll be joined by three distinguished individuals on different aspects of working remotely. Working remotely is pretty popular these days. I know I'm doing that today. And so you're gonna have to please excuse any phone ringings and other intrusions that we have, such as potentially the neighbor's gardener, the doorbell, barking dogs, but we're going to get through it. So we're going to be looking at a lot of different aspects to telecommuting and working remotely. It's really interesting, the dynamic that's really changing. This is something that's really potentially maybe one of the benefits of this pandemic is the ability for all of us to work interactively much better. So without any further ado, let's get on with the show. And first of all, I just want to tell you just a little bit about the SBDC. The Small Business Development Center program is pretty much in all 50 states. There's about 1,000 centers around the country. We're pretty busy these days, like probably about everybody else, and do a lot of things. We do one-on-one consulting free of charge. We actually do training programs and webinars. Most of our services are free. So reach out if you have a need for a business question or if you need some business assistance, particularly in these troubling times. We're actually located here in Bakersfield in the middle, Kern County, serving Kern, Inyo, and Mono counties, a rather large swath of, needless to say. So we have our next webinar coming up on Wednesdays. We're kind of committed to managing businesses, managing small business during the pandemic. That'll be coming up again next Wednesday, and we'll keep it as fresh and current as we can. Information generally comes earlier that day. So now let me introduce our panelists. I'll introduce them each individually as they get ready to prepare on their particular topic. But our first presenter is going to be Tabari Brannon, and he is the co-founder actually of Mesh Cowork and organizer of the Bakersfield Startup. So doing that meetup, and has been doing it for years. Before that, Tabari served as a staff chaplain in a local Bakersfield hospital. His master's level training in ministry has taught him how to start, nurture, and grow communities around shared values. Tabari was able to translate his experience in communities into several startup ventures. His vision for Mesh is to establish multiple locations in Bakersfield and Kern County and around the San Joaquin Valley, providing a space for vibrant entrepreneur tech and communities that only decreases the barriers of entry for workspace, but also offer members a valuable network and services experience. Tabari, thank you for joining us. I'm going to give you controls there, so take it away.
Tabari, you're muted.
Thank you, Kelly. And so what I will be talking about today is the tools that you can use while you are working remotely or while you're working from home. And so I'll be talking about three specific tools. I'll give a brief overview, and then I'll provide to Kelly best practices for each one of these platforms. So the first one that I will go over is Zoom. And so Zoom is primarily used for video conferencing. And so the way that we're currently using Zoom is in the video webinar format. Now, the video webinar format is a little different from just a normal Zoom meeting. In the webinar format, it gives you the ability to have presenters as well as attendees You can also have waiting rooms, and you can also transfer the presenter to attendees. Now, typically when you're using Zoom, you're going to use it in the meeting format. So that can either be for one-to-one meetings, or it can be for meetings up to 100 people on the free platform, or even more if you're a paid version. Now, another way that you may not know how to use Zoom is as a conference room. And so the Zoom company actually has hardware that will pair directly with Zoom, and you can put front-facing cameras and iPads and other equipment in your conference room, and it makes it easy for people to utilize the platform in a physical location. The last two things I want to go over is that Zoom also has the ability to be used as a phone system, much similar to some of the other voice over IP services such as Skype or Google Voice. This is another way that you can utilize Zoom. And so the last thing I want to talk about is business instant messaging. And so inside of Zoom, there is also chat features that you can be utilized during your meetings, and also in other formats. And so the main thing that I want to hit home with Zoom, it's just a way to visually stay in contact with your team. Now, your organization may have another platform that they're using for video conferencing, but the main thing is to find a platform that works for you, and then also make sure that when you are using Zoom or other platforms that you're using best practices. And I'll be providing a link for that at the end of the webinar. So the next one I want to talk about is, it's called Asana. Now, Asana is a project management platform. And so there are many other project management platforms. There's one called Basecamp. There's also another one called Trello. But essentially what this does, what a project management tool allows you to do, is to put tasks inside of a central place so that everyone in your team can have visibility on what's happening in the organization, and where you are in terms of progress at the particular project. And so Asana does several things. So on the baseline, it does project management, but also has the ability to manage the workflow of your team. Inside of Asana, you can set up various views where you can see what projects have high priority, what projects have low priority, what is the progress on this particular project. In our own particular organization, we use it to make sure that we're communicating tasks that need to be completed. We typically have meetings. We enter those tasks for the particular projects inside of Asana, and we assign dates to them, and we follow up and make sure that people are getting their tasks done. Another feature inside of Asana is the calendar feature. And so in the calendar feature, when you put a task, you can see it in a calendar view and see when that task is going to be completed and how much time you have left. But overall in Asana, the main thing is that it helps you and your teams to be productive while you're working remotely. And my last tool I have here is called Slack. Now, if you're like me, you've probably received at least 30 different emails, either from your internal team or for other people seeking to communicate with you. And what Slack does, it actually seeks to be a replacement to email. Now, a lot of organizations may not be ready to as Slack says, break out of the inbox. But if you have a smaller team or you're getting started, I would definitely recommend that you take a look at Slack. And so essentially what Slack does, it organizes communication for your team inside of what's called channels. So rather than email threads or continuous back and forth in emails, what you do is you create channels based around anything you want. It could be a project, it could be a team, and you invite everyone to put any pertinent information that they want delivered to each person on that project or in that team in a Slack channel. I think a lot of us are old enough to remember IRC or remember AOL. And on AOL and IRC, which is Internet Relay Chat, they had different groups that you can join. So Slack is similar to that. All the information you want to disseminate to that particular group lives inside of a channel. And what's cool about that, let's say you're trying to, let's just use the marketing department. Say you have a channel that's called marketing, and it's specifically for the marketing department, and you want to onboard a new team member. So the challenge with email is that when you send email to another person, all that knowledge and all that intellectual property lives directly in your inbox, and no one else has access to it unless you forward it to them. And so what Slack does, it allows you to have all that information in one single place, and all a person has to do is scroll up through the messages in that particular channel and get onboarded quickly to what's been happening with the team. And another thing that I want to talk about is that Slack also integrates with other platforms. One of the ways that we use Slack is it almost acts as a command center for our business. So let's say a new lead comes in, it goes into a channel in our Slack team, and it lets me know that a new lead has come in. Or say I need to, I'm having a conversation with someone inside of Slack, and I need to add a task inside of Asana. I can do that directly from Slack. And so it just gives you the ability to not only keep communication in one place, but it gives you the ability to control other parts of your business from one single location. And so overall, what I wanted to emphasize with these different technology tools is, you know, not every single one will be perfect for your team, but in the lines of communicating with your team, there are many options out there in terms of project management. There are many options out there. And then also with instant messaging and team communication, there are many things out there. So I have a few best practices that, like I said, I'll share with you later. And hopefully if you have any questions, you can drop it in the question and answer, and we can answer those for you later. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tabari. And one thing I failed to mention is that we are going to be answering questions at the end, and we think that's vitally important. And you'll see you have a Q&A box. Go and use the Q&A box. It's okay to use the chat during the webinar, but if you could funnel your questions during the Q&A box and actually do that, we will take a considerable amount of time to answer your questions. Also, at the conclusion of today's webinar, you'll receive by separate email a survey. So please fill out the survey and tell us what you would like. There's going to be some additional resources that are available that are provided by the panelist. And if you would like access to those, we will gladly email those. So one thing that's really kind of coming out of this before I introduce our next presenter, one thing that is really seems to be happening is that, number one, is that some people I'm talking to they really like working at home. And if you're in that position to where you're enjoying what you're doing at home now, there could be a capability for you to do so even after the crisis subsides or ends. So really, what I've told a couple of people is really to demonstrate your value from working at home if you like it. Demonstrate the worth it is to your organization. You know, they don't have to pay rent. They don't have to pay utilities on your space. There's a lot of things that you can do at home that are beneficial. So keep that in mind as we go through the day to day and as we go through the coming weeks and months, that to really sell your position is to really show the value that you create by working at home. Okay, our next presenter is Justin Powers. And Justin is a problem solver and a community strategist. He founded the first co-working space in East Kern County. I think Tabari took the first one in Kern County. Kernville Co-work is a hub where high energy professionals can work where they play, recognizing the untapped potential of wildfire knowledge and experience. He founded FireVision, a drone-based real-time thermal imaging platform for wildfire operations. Unfortunately, maybe our next crisis. Throughout his career, and that is a problem solver, solving the next crisis before it gets here, hopefully. Throughout his career, Justin has worked remotely for software giants, Salesforce, and others as part of their Desk.com and Trailhead teams. In his spare time, Justin, along with his wife and 2 kids, enjoy outdoor activities, hiking, rafting, and whitewater kayaking. Justin, take it away.
Muted now?
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, as Kelly mentioned, please get the questions, keep them rolling in the Q&A section. We're looking forward to answering those. And I have to just mention the last tool that Tabari mentioned, Slack, is a fantastic tool. I don't know, it would be very difficult for me to work remotely and work from home without it. So I'm just going to go over some tips for staying productive while you're working from home. I think that's one of the big things that is hard for people to make the switch, is oftentimes their office is set up for productivity and oftentimes their home is not. So the first thing I would like to recommend for anybody that is going to be working from home for any amount of time, especially if you're either working with a team or if you have other people living in your home, is invest in a headset. And there's 2 reasons why you want a headset. One is to keep the outside world out. So you can put on a headset, maybe put on some tunes, maybe some nice relaxing music that you can still focus with, but something that keeps the outside noise away so you can, you're not as easily distracted. And the other reason is you're probably going to be on a lot more calls than you're used to. And having a headset allows you to stay focused on the call, hear it well, and still leave your hands available to type. You don't have to go crazy. The headsets that come with your phone are probably just fine. Those work really great for a lot of people. The example you see there on the left, the little volume knob is actually also the microphone. And if possible, for the sake of the people that are going to be on calls with you, if you can get a headset with a microphone, that's ideal. It just isolates your voice a little bit better. You're not getting quite as much of the rest of the noise from the rest of the room. I've worked from home for about the last 9 years, and so I've tried a lot of different headsets, a lot of different things. Just a couple real quick tips. Is there's different types. There's headphones that go inside your ears, which would be like the kind that you see there on the left. For some people, that's perfectly comfortable. For some people, it's very uncomfortable. I have a hard time with it. They hurt my ears. You have some that basically go on top of your ears, and for me, those kind of feel like they're pushing on like my earlobes, and those get uncomfortable after about an hour or so. Or you have some that go around the ear, and I believe the term for that is circumoral. just a couple of the headsets I have, they're pictured here. The ones I'm wearing right now are the Sennheiser Game Zero. And I do recommend, if you're looking for a good, comfortable headset that you can wear for a long time that is going to isolate the noise well, look into gaming headphones. Don't look at office headphones. Office headphones are generally made to be as cheap as possible because corporations are buying as many of them as they can. Whereas gaming headphones are really made for comfort, and they're really made to be heard well and to hear well. And so generally at the same price point, you'll get more bang for your buck if you're looking over at the gaming headset section of Amazon. The other pair I have are these SteelSeries Arctis 7. I like those because they allow me to take them wirelessly. I tend to pace a lot while I'm on conference calls. They also have some really nice features, and they've got the little microphone boom that you can retract, which is a nice feature. Another tip I would give you is to use meetings wisely. Oftentimes what happens when companies move from being in an office to being separated is they say, wow, we're not able to talk to each other as often, so let's start having more meetings. And that can actually be counterproductive, as many of you can imagine. So what it requires is just being a lot more diligent about how you're using those meetings. Come into meetings with a clear agenda, and don't feel like you have to use the entire meeting just because you scheduled an hour or because you scheduled 30 minutes. Once you get through what you need to get through, end the meeting and move on with your day. Another really important thing is to try to avoid spacing out the meetings. If you've got meetings with, say, only a 30-minute break in between meetings, you're not going to have a chance to pick up something else and start working on something else and really start being productive with that other task before you have to switch back into meeting mode. So if you can, try and group your meetings together. It's just a little bit more important when you're working from home than when you're in an office, just because people don't realize how disruptive it is, because you're not having to walk into meeting rooms and whatever. And make chat work for you. Like I said before, my clear favorite is Slack. It's free to start out with. So if you're not sure if your team is, if it's something that's going to work for your team, just try the free version. You don't have to pay until you need a lot of other features. And the free version gives you a ton of real help. The only time you generally have to pay for it is when you need some of the very advanced features, or if you want to, if you don't want to lose your history, after I think a month or two, Slack will automatically archive your history if you have the paid plan. But one thing, it's just kind of a psychological thing. When you're in an office, people have to get up and walk over to you and tap you on the shoulder to bug you and ask you questions. And there's a little bit of friction to that, so people don't do it very often. However, when somebody is just a few keyboard strokes away, what tends to happen is that people will start bugging you a lot more frequently. Little questions that maybe they could have answered themselves. If it's real easy to just hop over to Slack and just ask you, they'll ask you. So it can be a source of more interruptions if you're not very diligent about how to use it. Don't be afraid to tell people. Sure, absolutely. Let me get to that after I finish this thing I'm working on. Don't feel like it has to be like a phone call where you have to respond right away. Give yourself and give other people permission to wait until you're done with your current task to respond to Slack. And definitely look into some of the integrations that Tabari talked about. There's a lot of great integrations to integrate Slack with your existing tools and to just allow it to make you more productive. Along the same lines, try to give yourself time periods during the day where you can just focus on being productive. This is something that works well in an office environment too, but I found that it's especially helpful in the in a home office. And that is what I will often do sometimes is I'll even set up a meeting in my calendar where it's just me for an hour or whatever time I need to just really focus and get things done. And that way nobody can schedule meetings during that time. And I'll turn off my Slack notifications, I'll close my email, and I'll just get whatever work it is I need to get done. It's really important that you make that space to be able to focus, and not just the that psychological space or that time space, you also need to make a physical space you can focus in. And I know this is something that Heather's going to mention a little bit later as well, but one thing that people will often do when they're moving to working from home is they'll just start working from the couch, or they'll work from their bed. And there's a lot of kind of psychological reasons why it's very difficult to work from those places, which I know Heather's going to get into, but it's also the center of your house. It's where all the activity is happening. So if you can, and I know that a lot of us were just thrown into this, a lot of us didn't choose our homes and our apartments to have a space to work out of, because that was never something that was in the plans for a lot of us. But try to find a place that is not the place where you entertain yourself. It is not the place where you sleep, where you can sit down, stay focused. Maybe you're pointing towards a wall, or maybe you're looking out a window, but something where you can just focus on what it is you need to focus on, and put on those headphones. Drown the rest of the world out if you can. And this goes without saying, but stay away from the newsfeed, especially during all this stuff going on with COVID-19. It's distracting anyways, but it's something that if you're working from home, it's a little bit harder to tear yourself away from that, from those distractions. So if it is something where you do want to take a break and you do want to read a couple news articles, get up from wherever you're working, go somewhere else, hopefully a phone or a different computer, take that break, and then come back to where you're working from. Don't mix your entertainment and your work in the same space. And then just speaking of focus, I'm just going to give a little bonus. There's this great app that I use for staying focused for periods at a time. It's called Forest. It's free on both, I believe it's on both the Google Play Store and the iPhone App Store, where you can, it creates a great way for you to stay focused, stay off your phone for certain periods of time. And it gives you little in-game rewards, and it's kind of fun, but it actually, there's kind of strong psychological reasons why it works. I don't have time to get into those, but yeah, definitely check it out. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the Q&A section. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Justin. Great tips, great tips. Having worked at home myself for about 10 years before this current employment thing I got going on, it reminds me, I have a couple of tips or traps. I don't know which they are, but the one thing that I would recommend is if you have a big, large bag of potato chips in your kitchen on the counter, don't open it. Because, at least for me, if I open it, what I'll do is I'll go back about every 30 minutes and get a couple more of those little salty chips. So if it's not opened, it's not a problem. And I'm not worried about eating the whole bag then, but it's just the distraction, and maybe it's a wanted distraction. Maybe it plays well with my male pattern ADD. So that's my tip. And also, please keep hitting the question box. I know we've been answering a lot of stuff on chat, but we're going to be having an extended question and answer series afterwards, so we got plenty of time for your questions. Okay, it's time to introduce Heather. And Heather Berry is, well, what are you, Heather? Heather she founded the Peace of Mind Therapy in the Kern River Valley back in the 1990s. And Heather Berry Consulting or Counseling has located in Wofford Heights, I believe, and it brings a great work-life balance perspective to what we're discussing today. And as Justin mentioned, the psychological factors of working at home differently than working in an office, and bring us all that. Heather, take it away.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, can you hit that in? Yeah. Oh, there it is. Okay, my IT is helping out. Oops. Okay. Okay. Welcome. So my goal is to just kind of talk about how do we manage the work-life balance of shifting from a business to home. So the first thing that I think for many of us is that this is to name the current experience of this virus and the threat that it has caused and created this urgent shift. And I think it's important to just to name exactly that the decision making, the shuffle for many was incredibly urgent and didn't have a lot of prep time. Some of you may be experiencing that files or things that you needed got left at your workplace, that connections or data has been difficult to access, and you pretty much perhaps only had a day or two's notice to completely move into not only a different work environment, but your whole family came in too. So it's not just you and everybody is off doing their thing, but for many of us, everybody's home. Everybody's kind of scrambling for bandwidth and kitchen table space and creating a work environment. Also layered onto this is a great deal of anxiousness, fear, technological overload for many of us. We've been receiving tons of news and information and become temporarily a little overdone and perhaps addicted to the news feed, as Justin said, and getting information overload, seeking out quick answers and quick fixes to long-term challenges. And I think that layers onto this experience of how do I move my business to home. It's for many of us hasn't been a well planned out 6-month move of layering in exactly what we need with training. It's been go home now and figure it out. And not a great time for gathering information as everybody else is seeking it, and not an easy time for decision making when we're in kind of a time of high level angst. And for many of us in those kinds, it's difficult to concentrate. It's difficult to make decisions. So that's kind of a layering on of choosing what kind of headset is also, are there any available now? And can I get delivery? How do I get stuff? There's just additional anxieties and challenges to all of this that we're making this decision in the middle of a pandemic. So looking at how do we work from home effectively, one is create that morning routine. Get up and get rolling. I think for some of us, that have perhaps worked in offices and not had the pleasure of working from home, there's been a little bit of envy about those people who are at home in their PJs, sipping breakfast around 11 and watching the Today Show and being in their jammies on the couch trying to do work, when in fact, that's really not how it works, and that's certainly not effective. So maybe a test drove that on the first day or two, but now at this point, we need to establish a routine. Working from home, get up at the same time every day, set your alarm. If you already had a routine of showering, getting dressed, going for a run, keep that routine. Make your bed. There's a surprising amount of scientific research that talks about the value of making your bed, that in pulling up the sheets and tucking in the corners has a real mental mindset of here I go. This is handled, sleep is over, I'm not going back for midday naps, that we are, even in the midst of a really bad day, we can come back and go, I got that done, I got the bed made. So making your bed actually is particularly important. I'm really also stressing that there isn't a transition period of wrapping up the house and then driving to work and starting your day. And I encourage you to, before you get to your desk, to go outside. There is also some really fascinating research about what natural sunlight on the eyes and the forehead and the crown of the head does for mental, emotional mindset. So I really encourage you, step out on the deck, drink your cup of coffee out there, take a walk with the dog before you get to the desk for that transitional movement between home, chatter, and workspace. So creating a workspace. You may be elbowing other members of the family out who are all home. In my house, there are 4 of us now. When nobody was home, there are now 4 of us looking for workspace. And so there was a mad dash for buying desks and creating a workable work environment, realizing there wasn't adequate lighting in some areas. So getting that workspace is really important for lots of reasons. One is that there is a place for you to particularly go, and that your belongings are in one place. This is where my work stuff is, for a sense of organization. For those of us that suffer with a little challenge and focus anyway, then we can kind of leave things in an orderly fashion. It also sets a message to the family of, when I'm in this space, this is what I'm doing. And for many of you, there may be small kids, other people that are also adjusting. For many of us in this experience of being home, also our kids are there too. And they're busy and they're bored and they are demanding time from us too. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to manage kids. Setting boundaries is particularly important. One is moving to that workspace and saying, this is where I'm at, and I need to be allowed the opportunity to focus and do what I'm doing. Also, I encourage a conversation with family and partner as to, what are your needs? Do I need complete silence? Do I need non-distraction? Are there times in my day where I cannot be interrupted? Or there are times in my day where it can be? What are going to be my work hours? When are my times off? When can you expect me to return to the family and be available? Establishing a calendar together as to when our mutual work schedules going to work. So setting boundaries are going to be really important. Working with the kiddos. Many of us remember this video of the poor guy trying to do his teleconference with all the toddlers. It's not easy. And if you have little ones at home, they don't get it. And we have to have understanding that they're not going to get it, particularly this age range. Your children are always going to see you as a parent. They're not going to see you as an employee or an employer, and that you have these other roles. They just see you as mom. They just see you as dad. So to establish these kinds of boundaries with children, all the more important for a designated workspace. For maybe little kids, a little stop sign on the door that says, don't enter. Establish routines. Practice when you're not working. Practice with the kids as to, okay, so when you see the door closed, and are you allowed to knock or not knock? Or, and if you don't have an opportunity to have an actual, many of us don't have a particular room to designate as the work area, maybe a child gate or some sort of barrier. And particularly for little ones, you're going to need a visual barrier because if they see you, they want you, and they need you. So all the more importance as well, and this goes for our pets too. How many people are interrupted with the cats and the dogs, and they don't get it either. Be sure and take a break. I think we can become tunnel visioned and not allow ourselves those natural breaks that we should have in a workday. And take this opportunity. For many of us, we're recognizing that this pandemic has provided us a gift of being home, of being with family and being in that environment. So take that gift, take your breaks, read a story with the kids, share a snack together, and pet the dog, step out onto the deck, take a walk through the garden, refresh yourself. And the more appropriate breaks you take, the better focus you're going to be able to have to sustain your workday. So taking a breaks are really important. this was an interesting thing that I think can be really important in some way or another, related to step outside at the end of your day and before your day starts. Fake a commute, whether that's a walk around the block, whether that's a get in your car and drive around if you need to, or outside exercise. But I really encourage you to take that opportunity to decompress, to separate yourself from your work so that when you can be with your family and be home, you can be present with them. Turn off your phone. As Justin said, turn off your notifications. It's going to be really challenging when your desk is right there to not respond to the email, to not have dinner and just go back for an hour or two, just a little bit more to get that thing set up. Be careful with yourself. Recognize that we're already in a state of stress and overdue, and we need nourishment, we need healing, we need a good night's sleep. We need to take care of ourselves. So the tendency is to overdo. So be careful about that. Again, this kind of goes in, turn off your work day. Put your phone down. Get off the emails and the idea that a couple more things and I'll be done. When your days are off, take your days off. Don't step over to the desk and put in a half day. Take your days off and honor your evenings. Okay. And this last thing I wanted to touch on was just be present. If you're at work, be at work. And if you're at home, be focused, be there, do some breathing, center in, and be with your family. Okay, that's me.
Great. Thank you, Heather. I certainly needed that therapy session. And the price is right, too. We're going to move on to questions now. And I know we've answered a lot of the questions in the chat box that everyone can see. Now, I believe that the question box, everybody can't see, and there was some questions that were answered in there. And I'm going to have all of our panelists unmute your mics and jump in whenever you want. But the first question was for video conferencing with students and filming outside, what is the best kind of device to use? Justin?
Yeah, I can summarize that. And if anybody can let us know in the chat if you are seeing those answered questions in the Zoom Q&A, that would be helpful. So it depends on the type of gathering you're trying to put together. If you are whether it's students or anybody else, if you want to have something like we're doing right now, where you have one or more people that are presenting to others, and you don't want the distractions of people unmuting their mics and jumping in and seeing everybody else, Zoom really gives you that those opportunities. Whereas if it's something that's a little more collaborative, if you want everybody to see each other, if you're looking to kind of create this sense of community, allow people to see each other's faces and talk to each other, both Zoom and Hangouts both work equally well for that. And in my opinion, if you're talking about young students, I do think that the Google interface is a little bit more user-friendly, a little bit more intuitive. You did mention filming outside. And I don't know, I don't have a good window around here I could demo that on. But what'll happen is if you have a window behind you and you're inside, you'll just see the silhouette of the person. Webcams and phones just do not do well with various levels of light. I opened a few windows in front of me to give light on the front of my face. But just something to be aware of. If you're outside, if you're in a bright area, make sure that there's a lot of light on your face.
Okay, well, we got mixed response on that. We got some people that could see the questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box, and some could not. So let's answer a couple more of them just so everybody can get to those. Which is better, Zoom or Google Hangout for elementary kiddos?
So
Yeah,
I think go ahead,
Justin kind of touched on that a little bit, but I think the overall idea is, understanding who's your target audience. As Justin said a few seconds ago, if you're using, if you're working with kids, the Google interface is probably a little bit more simpler. Zoom is a little bit more complicated between the email the invites and calling in. So if you're working with kids, like Justin said, Hangouts might be a little better, or even Skype might also work.
Okay, good. And a little follow-up to that is, are there some other very capable video conferencing options besides Zoom?
Yeah, well, Justin mentioned Hangouts. The ones that I personally have had experience with are Skype. What else? I think we mentioned GoToMeeting here earlier. Any other ones that you've had experience with, Justin or Kelly?
Slack also has video ability. I believe you have to get the paid version to have multiple people sharing their video at the same time. But that, if you're just looking for real quick impromptu chats with your coworkers, Slack can be really good for that. But yeah, I think for smaller groups, I think Hangouts is great. And then as you kind of get larger in your organization, or you know, with students or whatever, I like Zoom, and then GoToMeeting scales really well for larger groups as well.
Right.
And I can add, this is our 8th year of doing webinars, and probably the first 5 years we did with GoToWebinar and GoToMeeting, and had a good experience. The one difference we saw between that and the Zoom platform, and then actually in between we used another platform called Webinato, that had nice features, but it just didn't work out well for us. But the difference we saw, and it's maybe changed by now, is that the Zoom platform was ADA compliant, and there was some issues back in the day with GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting. So that would be the only things I would add on that. If ADA compliance is something that's really important to you, like it is being part of a university, it is for us. So that's the main factor there. Okay, we have one more question, and then I'm going to warn Tabari. I'm going to ask him, because we had so much activity in the chat box and in some of the questions on Slack. I'm going to ask him after this question if he could take control over and maybe go online and give us a little Slack demonstration. So Bill asked, if you're sharing confidential data information with your group, how can this be done with Zoom, Asana, and Slack?
Right. So what I would say from, you know, like a beginning standpoint is that make sure that you're first of all using unique, secure passwords. If you're not using a password manager, that was one of the tools I was going to recommend. I would recommend using a password manager. There are lots of them out there. LastPass is the one that I use, and you can have LastPass generate a secure password for you. From there, inside of Slack, you can have private channels that are only available for people that you want to be in that particular channel. And then also inside of Asana, with the paid version, I believe all the messages are encrypted. But you know, use caution. Now, if you are in a healthcare organization, I would recommend that you do some additional research to find out whether Zoom is HIPAA compliant. If you're selling, if you're sharing patient information.
I can speak to that. Zoom has a upper level, which is HIPAA compliant.
Okay, there you go.
Meet, if you are within G Suite, is very inexpensive and allows for a business associate agreement and is HIPAA compliant as well as Doxy and VC. Those also are another 2 platforms that are HIPAA compliant.
There you go. Thank you. Uh-oh, Kelly, I think you're on mute, Kelly.
Kelly, you're still muted.
Oh, good. You didn't hear my dog bark. So Justin, we're going to take one more question, and then Tabari, why don't you grab the controls and get ready for the Slack demonstration? Okay. And Just a quick question for Justin. Wondering about the forced app and if it can be used in a group, like a force grove.
Oh, I haven't seen it used in that way. I don't think that's what it's designed for, but I'm sure you could probably ask them about that. That actually, one thing we have done, if you want to have kind of group, if you want to take that experience of just having some really deep focus time, is to kind of group up and have a focus time together. So one thing you can do is to find a group of people, say, hey, we're going to have an hour of focus time. Everybody hop on a hangout together. You're not talking to each other, but you're leaving your microphones on, you're leaving your webcams on, and say, okay, hey, let's take a 20-minute sprint and just get as much done as we can. Get as much as you can in 20 minutes, and then take maybe 5 minutes to maybe take a break, decompress, talk about what you got done, and then do another 20 minutes. It's called the Pomodoro technique. That's spelled Pomodoro. And we find that if you do it in groups, it's a little more invigorating because everybody's kind of having this shared sense of just being extremely productive all at the same time. So I haven't seen it done in the Forest app, but it's certainly something you can do through like Hangouts or something like that.
Great. We'll take it away, Tabari. We have about 10 minutes left. So Slack demonstration. Keep your questions coming. We'll try to get to some more before we're done.
Okay, so let's see. Hopefully there's nothing crazy in here. I know our folks are kind of crazy sometimes. But so this is Slack. So every Slack has kind of a catch-all room, and that room can be called anything you want to call it. And so our catch-all room is called General. But you can see right here is we have a curated calendar of events inside of Google, and every Monday at 9 o'clock it sends out a message on all the calendar events. And so you see my last message was about this webinar. I also was telling people about, hey, this Costco has food right now. You also have let's see, we have private channels. So this is a private channel between me and our employees. This is also another private channel. Let me see what else. We have a channel for opportunities, job opportunities. So it's really very diverse in what you can do with it. And let me show you, while I have the control here, let me show you Asana real quick. So this is what Asana looks like. The view that we have right now is called, now you guys can correct me if I pronounce it incorrectly, Kanban, is that how you say it?
Yep.
So you start with tasks that are in process that you want to do, and then when you want to move them in process or you want to move them to be done like that. You can also have a calendar view, as I was talking about earlier. You can have a timeline view. You can also have an update where you can see the view on the progress. So that's just a quick overview of Slack and Asana.
It's also good to mention that Slack has excellent clients for all operating systems and phones. And you can have multiple Slack accounts using that. So I'm just looking at mine on my computer and my phone. I've got the Slack team for Kernville Cowork. I've got Mesh Cowork, and I've got FireVision, my other company. And they're all in one place. So it's a great tool, even if you're using it for different groups and everything. It works pretty well.
Okay, fantastic. We got one more question. We got, Heather, can you repeat the platforms that are HIPAA compliant?
Yeah, absolutely. So G Suite, if you are using Google Meet within G Suite, so it's already a secured setting, you can contact G Suite. They'll give you a business associate agreement, and that then makes it HIPAA compliant. Also, Zoom, I'm not sure, but under the current COVID-19 status, I think they have opened it up a little bit more, but you can contact them for a business associate agreement, as well as Doxy. It's DOXY, and another, it's doxy.me, doxy.me. Then there's another one called VC, so it's the letter V, SEE. Those, and Spruce. So VC, Doxy, Me, Spruce, and Google, and the paid upper version of Zoom is HIPAA compliant.
Great. Next question. Are there any suggested norms to establishing effective communication with group interactions? And we're talking about using Google Hangout or Zoom.
So I think probably the first thing is keep your webcams on and your microphones off, especially because we're all right now very isolated, and we're all missing that contact. We have a rule at on our teams: messy hair, don't care. Just put the webcam on. Doesn't matter. We all want to see each other's faces, and it's a lot easier to read body language, which is a large part of communicating if you have the cameras on. But turn your mic off if you're not actually talking, because otherwise it can get very distracting when somebody turns on a blender in the back or something like that. That's probably the biggest thing. I also, for teams that are almost entirely remote but have some people in an office, I often encourage those teams to never meet in a conference room. Nobody wants to be the one person that's on a phone call while everybody else is in a conference room, sharing their little inside jokes and giving each other handshakes, which you shouldn't be doing right now. Those are kind of my favorite.
Yeah, and then for the Zoom platform specifically, I will share some best practices with the group later on. But the main thing is with Zoom, you have your personal meeting room, and then you also have a randomly generated code for the meeting room. So you want to make sure that you're always using the randomly generated code and you're not reusing it. And then another additional thing you want to do is to not allow participants to start the meeting before the participant comes. So just a few things you can do. And then also with Zoom, you can mute everyone. You can also turn off video for everyone. So those are some of the nice features that you have with Zoom.
It's nice having that control too, trust me. So I guess that's the last question that we have. Please spend some time and fill out the survey and let us know what you really want, webinars and topics you want to see. Leave your email address in there if you would like some of the materials that are going to be available, such as Tabari's best practices. I want to thank Heather and Tabari and Justin for joining us today. It was informative. Seems like everybody got a lot out of it. Good turnout. So for Justin, Tabari, and Heather, I'm Kelly Bearden. Thank you for attending today's webinar. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.